Hi, this is Annie Paulus, Realtor with Keller Williams St. Pete, and this video is all about earnest money. So what is earnest money? Why is it important and how much should you be putting in as earnest money? Who gets to keep the earnest money if the deal falls through? I'm going to answer all of these questions in today's video. So first things first, what is earnest money? Earnest money is a deposit made to a seller that represents a buyer's good faith to make a purchase, such as the acquisition of a new home. The money gives the buyer extra time to get financing and conduct the title search, property appraisal, and inspections before closing. So basically, earnest money can be considered a deposit on a home, an escrow deposit, or a good faith money deposit. Why should you pay earnest money? Earnest money isn't always a requirement, but it could be a necessity if you are shopping in a competitive real estate market. Sellers tend to favor these good faith deposits because they want to ensure that the sale won't fall through. Earnest money can act as an added insurance for both parties in the transaction. Earnest money could also lower the amount you need at closing because it's applied directly to your down payment or closing costs. Essentially, you are just paying some of the money earlier in the process. A seller looking at multiple offers is more likely to lean toward a buyer with approved funding, and having earnest money down on top of it can make your offer stand out even more. So, how much earnest money is enough? The amount of earnest money you should offer depends on the particular real estate market your desired property is in. A languishing real estate listing in a slow market may not need as much earnest money as in a hot market with multiple buyers who are vying for the same property. If you plan to purchase in a neighborhood where cash offers and bidding wars are common, a higher good faith deposit is a good idea in general. If you're working with a real estate agent, they should be able to provide direction on how much earnest money you should offer. If you are competing with others for the same property, it's in your best interest not to undercut the earnest money deposit amount because you could lose the home to a stronger offer. If it's a slow or moderate market, your agent can advise you if a good faith deposit in the standard range will be enough. The next question is whether earnest money is refundable. And the answer is it depends. To understand this better, let's take a look at these examples. Imagine this. Alan, Tony, and Sandy are all selling their homes. Corey is a home buyer who has looked at all three houses and wants one of them, but can't quite decide which one. If all three sellers require earnest money deposits, there are three scenarios that can play out with Corey's home purchase. Situation A could be when Corey doesn't want to decide on a single house just yet and makes a good faith deposit on all three houses. Alan, Tony, and Sandy each take their homes off the market and inform their other potential buyers that Corey wants the house. Later, however, Corey decides to buy Alan's house. So Tony and Sandy now have to put their homes back on the market and start looking for buyers all over again. Luckily, Corey's earnest deposits are Tony's and Sandy's to keep. This offers them some compensation for the time and money they lost due to Corey's backing out of the sales. The second situation could be that Corey doesn't have money to spare on making deposits on all three sellers, and after some consideration decides on Alan's house and makes a single deposit. Everything goes to plan, Corey moves in, and the deposit goes towards paying off the house. The third situation could be when Corey makes a single deposit to Alan, but after the home inspection, discovers the house is infested with cockroaches. Luckily, Corey has a home inspection contingency in the purchase agreement and decides not to buy and gets the deposit back from Alan. So earnest money has contingencies that protect both the seller and buyer in certain situations unless you expressly remove these contingencies from the contract, which I would highly advise against doing. When you make an offer on a home and the seller accepts, the sale is only finalized when contingencies or certain criteria are met. They are typically listed in the purchase agreement and cover inspection, appraisal, and mortgage approval, amongst other items. So let's take a look at some of the contingencies that will determine who gets to keep the earnest money. First is the home inspection contingency. The home inspection contingency is a common reason potential buyers back away from a deal. If your prospective home is inspected by a professional and some elements of the home come back in need of repair, a home inspection contingency can allow you to back out of the transaction. If you don't want to back out of the deal, you or your agent, if you are represented, could also negotiate with the seller to have the repairs made or have them lower the purchase price so you can do the repairs yourself. Next is the appraisal contingency. The appraisal contingency protects the buyer if the property is overvalued and is a very important contingency to have, especially if you are getting a mortgage. Cash buyers may sometimes choose not to have the appraisal contingency since they are not dependent on a lender to approve their loan. The lender obviously wants to protect their interest and they would usually hire a third party appraiser to determine the fair market value of the home and to compare it to similar properties for sale. With this contingency, if the home is appraised at less than the sale price, you can choose not to move forward with the deal and you will get your earnest money back. Or you can use appraisal to negotiate a new price. The next is the financing contingency. If you weren't pre approved for a mortgage when you put your earnest money deposit down, or even if you were and then you don't get approved, a mortgage contingency can protect you. You have the right to walk away and get your earnest money back as long as this contingency was listed in the agreement. There could also be a contingency for selling an existing home. Some contracts may include a contingency for selling your existing home. If you can't sell the home you currently own before you close on another home, this contingency lets you back out of the deal with your earnest money in hand. So now the next important question is when to waive a contingency. Well, in hot real estate markets, some buyers feel pressured to waive certain contingencies to make their offer more appealing to the seller. For instance, they may consider removing the financing contingency if they're absolutely certain they will qualify for a mortgage. However, it's never a good idea to waive the appraisal or inspection contingencies. Just a word of caution there. Those contingencies are there to protect the buyers. As a buyer, there are a few steps you can take to protect your earnest money deposit. First of all, always use an escrow account. The real estate market isn't immune to fraud. As a result, you should never give your earnest money directly to the seller or a real estate brokerage. Instead, go with a third party such as a title or an escrow company, which will hold your earnest money for you. You will usually pay by certified check, wire transfer, or personal check. Your check should be made out to that third party, and you can keep a copy of the check and request a receipt. The funds are then held in the escrow account until closing. The second thing you could do is know your contingencies. Contingencies are in place to protect both the seller and the buyer. So you should understand every scenario where you and the seller can back out and what impact that would have on your earnest money. Be sure you're comfortable with the contingencies and are confident that any actions you take won't result in losing your good faith deposit. The third thing is to stay on track with your responsibilities. And I can't stress that enough. To protect the seller, the purchase agreement will typically include a timeline for when every aspect of the process has to be met, such as the day by which you need an inspection done or when the mortgage should be approved. If you miss these deadlines, there could be grounds for the seller to back out of the deal with your earnest money in hand. The seller might not rescind the deal the minute you miss a deadline, but there is always a chance that it could happen and it could be a deal breaker. So always be on top of your deadlines, and your agent again can certainly help you keep track of all these deadlines. The fourth thing to keep in mind is to put everything in writing. A home is one of the largest purchases many of us will ever make. It's important to protect your investment along the way, which is why you should put everything in writing. This includes any changes to the timeline and buyer responsibilities. Make sure the purchase agreement lays out who gets the earnest money if the contract is cancelled. For instance, if the inspection fails and the buyer will get to keep the earnest money, state that in the contract. If the buyer has a change of heart and the seller will keep the earnest money, lay that out as well. Everything should be explained in detail in the contract. So the bottom line is that earnest money can protect a home buyer if something is wrong with the property, and also the seller if you simply want out of the deal. Going the extra mile with an earnest money deposit can also prove to a seller that you are a serious buyer and serious about your offer, making your offer stand out from the rest of the buyers. I hope that this video helped in clarifying some of the most common questions, doubts, and hesitations that buyers and sellers have with regards to earnest money. If you like this video, you may also like watching my video on how to get your offer selected in a bidding war situation. Remember to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. I will be back again soon with some more real estate news. Bye for now.